Good day, class. Today is one of the most important discussions in our Java course, and that is database connectivity. Now, in order for Java to connect to a particular database, in which case what we're going to use is MySQL. And in this particular computer, I've configured and set up uh, a fork in MySQL. So it means that it's a compatible version of MySQL called MariaDB. Okay, so all the commands that you use, or all the statements that you use in MySQL, will run in MariaDB. So let us just take a quick look on how to download the JDBC connector. So you can just Google it, this one, right? JDBC connector MySQL. Okay, and then we can click on the first option, and then since it's going to be MySQL, we're going to click on or select JDBC driver, this one, for MySQL connector J. So we click download, and then it will ask you what platform or operating system what the operating system do you need. So you can just select here, in which case this is Windows, so I'm going to click on platform independent. So after clicking that, okay, download either the first or the second. It's archived, so you need to unarchive it, but you need to find the MySQL connector. Okay, so I've already downloaded mine, and I placed it on the temp directory. Okay, so let's close it. Okay. And then before anything else, by the way, I'm not going to teach you the entire database. We're just going to create a database and then connect to it in this particular example. Okay, and then we're going to create a user. So here I'm going to look for MariaDB there, and I'm going to click the client or the shell. Okay, I'm going to minimize the command window for Java, or the shell for Java first, and then I'm going to enlarge this font so you may see clearly, like so. Okay. So first I'm going to log in as root. Okay, and then there's a command in MySQL, show databases command. So it just displays all the databases that is installed here. Okay, now since we're going to be coding our first example, and that code will connect to a database, we will create a database. So remember, I'm logged in as root in MySQL or MariaDB. So I may use that interchangeably, but it's the same thing. So I'm going to call my database prod. Okay, and then type in the show databases again. So that's it. It's there. I need you, even though this is Windows, we will still follow case sensitivity. So which means if it's uppercase, it's uppercase. If it's lower, it's lower. Okay, next we're going to create a user that we will use in MySQL. So we're going to call this user David, and the host or the server will be localhost. Okay, and then we're going to assign a password. Now, password, you can, of course, you must follow standard rules governing password. This one, for the sake of example, we're just going to make it simple. But in real life, you should follow guidelines on how to properly implement passwords. Okay? So remember, if you're going to log in as root or the super user or supervisor account, you need to be in front of the server to avoid security issues. Now, also, I'm using the built-in facility or security facility of MySQL or MariaDB, in which case I don't this is one of the most common mistakes of students who are studying database. They create another table for the user profile, which includes the password. No need, because there's a built-in facility for that, and I'll show you. So this one, it's simple. However, this will be encrypted by the database engine or MySQL for that matter. So if we press enter, oops, there should be another clause here. Okay, then press enter. Okay, now it uses the built-in facility of MySQL. So in order to demonstrate that, I'm going to open up. So kids, don't do this at home. Just kidding. Open up the database MySQL. This is the core database. Don't muck around with it, or don't fool around with it. Okay. And then just going to type in so I can show you what we have entered earlier. That's it. So remember, we defined David localhost, so this one. The password is already encrypted. I'm not going to go into much detail on it. Okay. And then once we have created the user, one of your jobs as database administrators is, of course, grant privileges or give privileges to particular users that are using the database. So in which case, we're going to give David the privilege of viewing, adding, and modifying data in the database. Okay. Okay. So I'm not, again, you consult with the manual, or this is not a course on database. I'm not going to be discussing in detail. So I'm just going to we're just demonstrating how to use or how to properly use the database. Okay, with the exception, of course, of the password. So I'm going to exit in MySQL. Going to exit the shell. Okay. And let's make some code. So we're going to call the code dbconnect.java. Okay, and in this particular example code, we need two of the following classes. We need the connection class, and we need the driver manager class, like so. I'm going to create the class. Don't forget the marker, of course. And then before creating the main program, I'm going to create a static variable or static object. Okay, called con or connect. And then we're going to because we're going to enclose it in a try-catch block. Sorry, try-catch block. Then the main program. So I'm in the mood today of typing it instead of copying it. Like so. And then we're going to define or declare and initialize the following strings. I'm going to explain this, of course. Then the next one is a connection string. First one is a driver string. So we don't have to enclose it or type it inside the method. Okay. Okay. And then we're going to create the user. So this example code, of course, we defined it earlier in our database as David. And then the password, we've created a simple password so that it's going to be simpler here in our code. But of course, again, when we're talking about production systems, it's going to be different. Okay, you have to hide the password or encrypt it here, even in code. My cursor is a little bit strange today. Okay. Now, the first string is the driver string. So we need this in order to you're going to find out later once I've coded the following below. So again, this is the location of the driver. The next one is a connection string. Now the connection string involves the URL, so it depends on the database. So since we're using MySQL, we're going to use this URL. Okay, and then the host or the server, since we're talking about this computer, we're just going to define it as localhost. And then the port number of the database, by default it's 3306, depending on your configuration. If you install MySQL or MariaDB in its default state, this one will be the value of the port. And then the database that we have designed or created, sorry. And then of course the user string, it includes the name of the user that we're going to connect to the database, and then the password. So again, the password is simple so that we will understand what we're talking about here. But in production or real life scenario, you must encrypt this one. Okay, it must be seen in the code, even in code. Okay, so I'm just going to type in the try catch block structure, so please bear with me. Remember the finally, we're going to need that, of course, later. Okay, now in the try catch or the try block, we're going to need to register and install the driver. So you already know the content of the driver variable. Next, we're going to connect to the database. Going to use the GetConnection method inside the driver manager class, and then inside we're going to include the connection as parameter, the connection variable, the user, and then the password. Okay, and then of course for completeness of the example, just going to give a simple message that the database, we have connected successfully to the database server, like so. Now if there's a problem, of course, so we're going to define a genetic exception. Then we're going to place that in the XX or exception object. So we're just going to give a simple message telling the user that we failed. Or there's a problem. And then okay, we can include the problem. Normally this one is used in logs, the content of the exception object. Okay, and then of course finally we need to close the connection. So I'm going to of course put in a little if block. So if there's a connection, we can proceed in closing that connection. So remember, so as we have discussed, or as I have discussed in my students on database and in programming languages, when the topic is database connectivity or file handling, once you open up something in a file or database, it contains a resource. Now that resource will remain open until you close it. So again, if you open a resource, you must close it. So in this particular example, we will be closing the resource. So again, I'm going to type in another, we must enclose it in a try catch block. I'm just going to type in the structure first. It's going to be the same in the catch block. And then we're just going to print out the error generated, if there is, of course. Okay. And then inside the try block, we're going to close the connection. Okay. So again, you can pause this video earlier if you want to follow in coding. We're just checking out errors. I'm just quickly checking out. There are syntactical errors. If not, we're going to save the program. Okay, and then compile it. Okay, once it's compiled, remember I told you that I have downloaded earlier the connector the for JDBC, and it's in the temp directory here. Okay, so in order to run our program, I'm going to use a switch. So the switch CP means include it in the class path, and then we're going to type this in. We're going to specify the location of the connector, the jar file. If this is an IDE like Eclipse or NetBeans, you just include the jar file. But since this is, and it's also a learning experience to know how to use a shell or the command prompt. Okay. Okay, and as you can see, we have successfully connected to the database server. So that's how you create a sample program. Let us see again the program, a connector program. In summary, we need to import the following classes: connection and driver manager, and of course we need to declare some strings. The driver that we need to load and register. The connection string, of course, it includes a URL. The URL is dependent on the particular database engine, the user, and the password. Okay, and inside, of course, the try block, we're going to load the driver and then initiate the connection. Okay. So in our next discussion, we're going to be talking about how to query a database, insert data, or query using select statement, or update a row or rows, set of rows. Okay. So class, good day, God bless.